whole path with Jesus changed that day in one of the most horrific moments that I've ever been through, but also one of the best in a way. And I want to share with you what happened. My outward pain became an inward pain, which I ended up going down the route of eating disorders. It started at the age of 11. And at the age of 13, I found alcohol. And alcohol became almost like my best friend at the time. And it bubbled away to the point of being about 15, 16. And I realized I was relying on that to help me to fit in. And in that, my path with God, yes, I was turning up to things, but I was feeling much more disconnected because it started becoming all about self, about what could I take in order to manage my life. And hindsight's a wonderful thing. I'd love to look back at all the decisions I made based on alcohol, which I now know was addiction bubbling away for me at a very young age. And I started drinking excessively. And at the end of university, in my wisdom, I went away abroad, ran nightclubs abroad. And I'll be honest, there were times in that time where I felt so stuck, but I didn't know where to go anymore. You know, I see that God had carried me so much. There were drink driving episodes. I ended up on probation, losing my driving license for the second time of 5 years. And I ended up, thankfully, being able to go into a 12-step rehab when I was 28. And this is the picture that they took of me. And bearing in mind that 16 years ago, I was broken. I literally, if you'd have asked me anything apart from what my name was, I didn't know it then. I was so cross with God at that time. You know, why did this happen to me? And I have to be reminded of this. It's not just about the physicality, but I was absolutely broken. 2 litres of vodka a day, just wanting to die and give up. And I remember going into that rehab, and it took about 12 days for the alcohol to wear off and the medication that they gave me to wear off. And I remember laying in my sort of dormitory type bed and saying, God, if you can help me get through this, help me to help other people in the future. And I started to turn my eyes towards him. I'd love to stand here and tell you that I never drank again. That is not my story. A bit like Peter when he took his eyes off Jesus, you know, he started sinking. I took my eyes off my recovery. I took my eyes off Jesus as well, and it became about me. I got complacent, I got arrogant in my recovery, and I ended up drinking again. I'm just coming up to 11 years sober, free of a drink. So 11 years ago, I ended up drinking again. That's when I ended up on probation. I went straight back to square one in a way. But the minute I started focusing on the healthy things, and it was hard, I'll be honest. You know, I knew I was at a crossroads at that moment, and I could either carry on drinking, knowing what the consequences might be, or I turned and I gave my all to follow a path of recovery. But for me, it has to be a spiritual path of recovery. And I'm so blessed that I know for me that is God and Jesus. And basically, I started on that path 11 years ago. And I'd love to say, for those that maybe don't know many people in addiction, the sort of preconception is for many that we get free of the drink, the gambling, the pornography, the drugs, the social media addiction, and then everything's rosy. Well, that isn't the case at all. Life still happens. Life still is pushing things in our direction to be people that God didn't intend us to be. Those instant gratification culture feeds people's, character when they have that sort of addictive nature. I genuinely believe that if we know a little bit about addiction, we can change how we perceive things. We can actually walk alongside people and help them to come out of what they're stuck in, that boat, help them to focus on him rather than the problem. Of course, we have to address the problem. Sometimes there's physical reasons we have to address the problem of addiction, but actually when we have a relationship with God, things change. And that is my experience when I see people with addiction, that hunger to change and bring God into the center. So if I could tell you one thing, I think my main thing, obviously I talk about, choosing, are we ready to step out of our boat? But also, I want to share a story with you which really kind of encapsulates for me something that happened in my recovery. So I want to take you back to something. I'd taken my mum's amazing. So I was 6 weeks back from my last drink. So just to put it into context, when people have drunk again, or drank again, following time in sobriety, it's incredibly hard. The shame I felt like a baby in this again. And I didn't honestly know if I was going to get a sustained recovery again. And I was a bit stuck in this sort of boat that I'd created of uncertainty, of fear. But I decided to make some positive moves forward out of where I was. And one of them I chose to do was to actually continue to do the things that I'd set up before I drank, even though I felt fragile. And this is the thing, it's about pushing through those fears. Even coming up here and talking to you today, I got anxious, but today I embraced the anxiety because this stuff means something to me. And in that moment, we were like, my mum and I were talking. The next thing, she just falls on the floor. And I thought she'd just fallen over. She hadn't. She'd had a sudden cardiac arrest in front of me. And there's my best friend, my mum. We even share the same birthday. We're so close. And she's literally on the floor, and she's grey. And the air's coming out of her body, the noises, the smells, the sounds. And I see this woman just dying in front of my very eyes. And in that moment, I grabbed the phone. I called the paramedic, I did 999. I ran and got my friend, and this for me was God just doing everything so beautifully. And I literally got her. She'd done her CPR training 2 weeks before. We both went in and we just started CPR on my mum. And in that moment, when the paramedics came in, just like things get busy in our lives, things just get crowded, and sometimes we just need to step back. And I stepped back. I remember stepping back, and I started praying. I started praying the serenity prayer, which we use in our 12-step fellowships. Grant me the serenity and the courage and all these things. And I was saying it out loud. And in this chaos, I felt this peace just fall in that room. And it was like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. And the paramedic that was shocking my mum's heart, he turned around to me after trying about 6 or 7 times and said, "We can't do any more." How often when a problem's so bad do we give up? I know I do sometimes. And in that moment, I pictured someone else in that room, and I know it was Jesus, without a doubt. I can't tell you exactly what he looked like, but I just knew the presence of him so close, and I focused on that. Like Peter did, he went back and looked. When he was sinking, he looked. And I looked to him. And then these words came out of my mouth, and I looked at the paramedic and I said, "Please, can you try one more time?" And in that moment, he did, just to appease me. He told me that afterwards, that's what they do. And her heart started. And I saw my mum come back to life. And the message I want to say today is that we only need to know a fraction of what someone's going through in their problem, their pain, their addiction, whatever it might be. We don't have to have all the answers at all, but we can walk with them into a place of hope, into a place of freedom. And all we need to do is just be there and walk with them and reach out our hands when they ask for help. Just like Peter did, just like I feel like I did in that moment with my mum. Those times where I said, I'm scared to go into a rehab, but I'm going to put my foot in front of the other and do it. God is in the business of restoring lives that are broken. And if this is you today and you know that this has touched your heart, about something that is troubling you. It doesn't have to be as full-blown as an addiction, but something we turn to that we know is not healthy in our lives. I ask you to maybe, as we worship, give that to God, speak to someone, pray to someone, pray with someone. Secrets keep us sick, and when we bring things into the light, He can do so much more than we could ever ask or imagine.